When a 70-year-old man walked into a luxury car dealership, the staff laughed and kicked him out, assuming he couldn't afford anything. But what happened next stunned everyone. Watch this powerful story about judgment, humility, and love. Harold Jenkins pulled his cardigan tighter as he walked towards the showroom of Prestige Motors. At 70 years old, Harold moved slowly, using his wooden cane more out of habit than real need. His white hair was thinning, and his clothes were simple and worn. The automatic doors to the showroom opened, and Harold stepped inside. The showroom was like stepping into a different world. Everything sparkled under the bright lights. The smell of new leather filled the air, and classical music played softly in the background. Harold's attention was immediately drawn to the center of the showroom, where a stunning silver Bentley sat on a slowly rotating platform. Harold had seen pictures of cars like this in magazines, but seeing one up close took his breath away. He walked toward the Bentley slowly, his rubber shoes making small sounds on the clean white floor. As he moved through the showroom, Harold noticed several salespeople in matching dark suits. When they saw Harold approaching, they looked at him briefly, then quickly turned away, suddenly finding other things to occupy their attention, except for one woman who smiled warmly before being called away by another customer. After looking at the Bentley for a bit, Harold looked around for help. A young salesman was standing nearby, looking at his tablet. His name tag said, "Blake Rhodes." "Excuse me," Harold said softly. Blake looked up from his tablet and quickly sized up Harold from head to toe. He saw an elderly man in an old sweater, practical shoes, and carrying a simple wooden cane. In Blake's mind, this looked like someone who had wandered in by mistake, perhaps confused about where he was supposed to be. Blake's expression changed from surprise to barely hidden annoyance, though he tried to maintain a professional smile. "Can I help you, sir?" he asked, though his tone suggested he'd rather be doing anything else. "Perhaps you're looking for the bus stop. It's just down the street." Harold shook his head, not bothered by the young man's rudeness. "No, thank you. I'm interested in that Bentley there," he said, pointing with his cane toward the rotating car. From across the showroom, another salesman noticed the conversation and drifted closer. His name tag identified him as Trent, and when he heard what Harold had said, he let out a small laugh and exchanged a knowing look with Blake. Blake straightened his tie and spoke louder than necessary, as if Harold might be hard of hearing. "Sir, that vehicle starts at $250,000. The particular model you're looking at, with all its special features, costs closer to $300,000. He emphasized the enormous numbers, speaking slowly and clearly. "Perhaps something more appropriate for your situation would be better. We have some used cars at our other location across town that might be more in your price range." Harold reached into his cardigan pocket, about to pull out his business card to explain who he was. But before he could say anything, a tall man with silver hair approached from a glass-walled office at the back of the showroom. He walked with the confidence of someone used to being in charge, and Harold could see through the office window that the gold nameplate on his desk read, "Calvin Harrington, General Manager." "Is there a problem here, Mr. Rhodes?" Harrington asked Blake, though his eyes were fixed on Harold with obvious displeasure. "No problem at all, Mr. Harrington," Blake replied smoothly. "This gentleman was just leaving." Harrington turned his full attention to Harold. His smile was cold and didn't reach his eyes. "Sir, I'm the general manager of Prestige Motors. We serve a very specific type of customer here, and our salespeople work by appointment only with serious buyers. I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises immediately." Harold tried to explain, his hand still reaching for his pocket. "If you would just let me show you." "Please don't make this difficult," Harrington interrupted, taking Harold's elbow with firm pressure and beginning to guide him toward the door. "Blake, please help escort our visitor out." Harold pulled away from both men, his dignity wounded, but his voice remaining calm and steady. "I can find my own way out, thank you very much. But you should know that—" "Have a pleasant day, sir." Harrington cut him off one final time as the automatic doors slid open. As the doors closed behind him, Harold stood on the sidewalk, the spring sun warm on his face. He looked down at the business card he had been trying to pull from his pocket, the one with his name and Jenkins Manufacturing CEO Emeritus printed in simple, nice font. He put it back into his sweater and looked thoughtfully across the dealership's big lot of fancy cars. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he was, a man whose company had manufactured parts for many of the luxury vehicles sitting in that lot, being treated like he couldn't afford a cup of coffee. Harold Jenkins had been a young engineer when he started his company in 1972. His wife Martha had believed in him when he'd come up with a more efficient design for engine components. They had to remortgage their modest home to fund his first manufacturing equipment. Those early years had been difficult. Sometimes they'd barely made payroll for their handful of employees. Jenkins Manufacturing had grown steadily. By the time he retired 10 years ago, turning daily operations over to his son, the company employed over 2,000 people across the country. Harold could have afforded to buy every car in that showroom without thinking twice about it. But material success had never changed Harold or Martha. They still lived in the same house they'd bought in 1975, drove sensible cars, and Harold still wore the sweaters Martha knitted for him during cold winter evenings. Everything changed 6 months ago when Martha was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors had given her perhaps a year. After the first shock and grief, Martha had made a list. "My goodbye tour," she called it. The list contained places she wanted to see one more time, foods she wanted to taste, and at the top of the list was, "Drive along the Pacific Coast Highway in a fancy car." Since then, Harold had stopped caring about things like clothes or appearances entirely. He'd taken to wearing the same comfortable clothes day after day. Sweaters Martha had knitted for him, simple pants with deep pockets, shoes that didn't hurt his feet during long days at the hospital. All his energy and attention went to making Martha comfortable and checking items off her precious list. The Bentley was Martha's idea, even though she had only mentioned it once, very casually. They were watching an old movie together on their anniversary, and a silver Bentley appeared, driving along a road by the sea. Martha smiled and said, "That's how I'd like to see the coast one last time." When Harold had told their daughter Catherine about his plan to buy the car, she'd suggested a rental. "It's more practical, Dad." But Harold had shaken his head firmly. "Your mother never asked for fancy things, not once in 40 years. If she wants to see the coast in a Bentley, then that's what she'll have. She deserves that and so much more." Standing on that sidewalk that afternoon, Harold knew he couldn't just walk away. Time was running out faster than anyone wanted to admit. Yesterday morning, Martha had been too weak to get out of bed for breakfast. Yesterday afternoon, she'd slept for 4 hours straight, something that would have been impossible just a month ago when the pain kept her awake. The doctor said she might have weeks, maybe a couple of months if they were lucky. There was no time for wounded pride, no time for nursing hurt feelings or teaching lessons to rude salespeople. Martha needed this trip, and she needed it soon. The spring weather wouldn't last forever, and neither would she. Harold pulled out his cell phone, a simple flip phone that his grandchildren always teased him about, and made a call. This wasn't about revenge or proving a point anymore. This was about love. Pure and simple. 3 hours later, a shiny black car with dark windows pulled up to the front of Prestige Motors. The driver, a worker in a dark suit and hat, quickly came around to open the back door. Harold stepped out first, still wearing the same sweater but now with a sense of urgent purpose. He was followed by a well-dressed woman in her 40s. Catherine Jenkins Morgan, his daughter, was a top lawyer at one of the city's best law firms. Today she wasn't dressed for court, but was still perfectly dressed in a fitted navy blue suit that probably cost more than most of the salespeople inside earned in a week. "Ready, Dad?" she asked, putting her arm through his. They walked through the open doors together. The showroom was busier now than it had been earlier. Blake was with another customer but stopped mid-sentence when he saw Harold. The manager, Harrington, came out of his office at that exact moment, his eyes getting big when he saw who it was. Before anyone else could react, the woman who had smiled at Harold earlier approached them. Her name tag read, Lisa Mitchell. She seemed to recognize what was about to happen and moved quickly. "Mr. Jenkins, isn't it? I noticed you looking at the Bentley earlier. I'd be happy to help you with that," she said warmly, stepping between Harold and the now approaching Harrington. The manager reached them, putting himself between Harold's family and the rest of the showroom as if to stop a possible scene. "Sir, I believe I made it clear earlier that—" he began in a quiet, worried tone. Catherine cut him off, her voice carrying the professional authority she used in courtrooms. "Let me tell you who I am. I'm Catherine Jenkins Morgan, and this is my father, Harold Jenkins." She handed the shocked manager her business card. "My father is the founder and former CEO of Jenkins Manufacturing. Maybe you've heard of us? We make parts for most major car makers, including several of the brands you sell here." Harrington's face lost several shades of color as he looked from the card to Harold and back again. "Mr. Jenkins," Catherine went on, her voice calm but with a clear edge, "wants to buy the Bentley Continental for himself and my mother, who is terminally ill. They've planned a last trip along the coast together, and time is not on our side. He was here earlier today, trying to make that dream come true, when your staff decided he wasn't worth their time." By now Blake had left his customers and walked over carefully, his earlier confidence gone. Trent, the salesman who had laughed, was trying to hide himself behind a nearby SUV. Harrington found his voice, though it came out higher than usual. "There's been a terrible mix-up. Mr. Jenkins, please accept my deepest apology for how you were treated earlier." Harold just looked at him calmly, but when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of urgency. "My wife doesn't have long. We need this car ready by this weekend." The simple statement hit the room like a physical force. Lisa's eyes immediately filled with understanding and compassion. Lisa stepped forward. "Mr. Jenkins, I'd be honored to help you. We can absolutely have the Bentley ready by this weekend. I'll make sure it has all the comfort features that would make your trip with Mrs. Jenkins as smooth as possible." Harold's face softened at her kindness. "Thank you, Lisa. I think Martha would appreciate that very much." "Actually," Catherine added, looking at her father, "Dad mentioned he might also be interested in 2 more cars, gifts for his grandchildren, Eliza and Tyler, for their graduations. But given the circumstances with Mom, we'd prefer to work only with Lisa, as she seems to be the only person here who understands that compassion should never depend on how someone looks." Harrington nodded quickly. "Of course, Lisa is our senior salesperson and has been with us for 15 years. She'll take excellent care of you." He glanced at Blake and Trent with a look that promised a very serious conversation later. Now, sitting in Lisa's office as she showed them the features of the Bentley Continental GT convertible, Harold felt a mix of emotions. The sadness was always there, like a shadow that never left. But there was also relief that he was finally making this happen, and a warm feeling knowing that soon he'd be giving Martha something that would make her eyes light up one more time. "Your wife will love these seats," Lisa said kindly, working efficiently to process everything quickly. "They have heating, cooling, and massage functions, and the ride is so smooth it shouldn't cause her any discomfort. We can have everything detailed and ready by Friday." "Friday would be perfect," Harold said, his voice thick with emotion. Martha always did like things that were well made. Said it reminded her of me. He gave a small laugh. Lisa smiled truly. She sounds like a wonderful woman, Mr. Jenkins. The best, Harold said simply. 40 years next month, though we probably won't make it to our anniversary. The words came out matter-of-factly, but the pain behind them was evident. Lisa's professionalism never wavered, but her voice was extra gentle as she continued processing the paperwork with remarkable speed. From the corner of the showroom, Harold could see Blake and Trent watching with barely hidden shock as Lisa also began paperwork for 2 additional vehicles, a Mercedes convertible for Eliza's medical school graduation and an Audi SUV for Tyler finishing law school. Harrington stayed nearby, coming over now and then to make sure everything was to their liking. His earlier rudeness replaced by almost frantic helpfulness. As they finished the deal, a cash buy that was nearly $1 million in sales, Harold turned to Lisa. "Thank you for your kindness and efficiency," he said. "It means more than you know, especially now." Lisa's eyes were warm. "It was my pleasure, Mr. Jenkins. My own father had cancer 2 years ago. I understand that time is precious," she said quietly. "I hope you and Mrs. Jenkins have a wonderful trip together." Harold had stayed mostly quiet during the talks, letting Catherine handle many of the details while he focused on the urgency of getting home to Martha. But now he stood, leaning slightly on his stick, and spoke to Harrington directly. "You know, when I started my company, I had nothing but an idea and a supportive wife. I learned early that treating people with respect costs nothing but means everything." Harold's voice was gentle but firm. "Time is the most precious thing any of us have, Mr. Harrington. Don't waste yours or anyone else's on assumptions." The manager had the grace to look truly ashamed. "You're absolutely right, Mr. Jenkins. I hope you'll accept my sincere apology for how you were treated." As plans were confirmed for the car to be ready Friday morning, detailed, gassed up, and perfect for their Saturday departure, Harold looked at the Bentley one last time. "She's going to love this," he said, more to himself than anyone else. The black car was waiting to take them home to Martha, and Harold knew that in just a few days he'd be behind the wheel of the Bentley, with Martha beside him, making their final precious memory together. Time was running short, but they were going to make every moment count. As they drove away, he pictured Martha's smile when he would tell her tonight that their dream trip was really going to happen. The cancer might be taking her body, but her spirit was still as bright as the day he'd met her. They would have this one last adventure together. The wind in what was left of her hair, the sun on their faces, and the road stretching before them like all the good years they'd shared. The trip couldn't wait. Martha couldn't wait. But love would make every second eternal. And that's the end of today's story. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this tale, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more captivating stories. See you in the next one.